"Get her out of my advanced placement class immediately," Mrs. Peterson hissed into her phone, eyes darting nervously toward the Korean exchange student sitting alone in the back corner. "She's disrupting my entire lesson plan." The fluorescent lights of Westfield High School's AP Literature classroom cast harsh shadows across the worn desks as the veteran teacher straightened her blazer and forced her most professional smile. Kim Soo-jin, whose family had invested everything in this American education opportunity, sat surrounded by 30 American students, her translator app glowing uselessly on her desk. The robotic voice that emerged from the device butchered Shakespeare's sonnets so badly that several students snickered openly. "I'm sorry, Soo-jin, but I'm afraid none of my students can assist with Korean translation," Mrs. Peterson announced, watching her 20-year teaching reputation crumble. The words hung in the air like a verdict. The classroom fell silent as Soo-jin's eyes filled with confusion and embarrassment. Her fingers tightened around the acceptance letter from Seoul National University that required her to maintain a 3.8 GPA in American AP courses. Behind her, a quiet girl with thick glasses and an oversized cardigan, the same student Mrs. Peterson had dismissed as unremarkable just that morning, silently organized her notebook. Her eyes briefly met Soo-jin's before looking away, her face revealing nothing. No one noticed her presence as the academic disaster unfolded. No one could see the Korean language certificates hidden in her locker, and no one had any idea that in just a few minutes she would change everything. 3 hours earlier, Westfield High School had been buzzing with typical Monday morning energy. The prestigious public school, known for its rigorous AP program and Ivy League acceptance rates, was preparing for perhaps its most challenging semester yet. "Miss Kim arrives at precisely 8:15 a.m. for first period," Mrs. Peterson announced during the emergency faculty meeting, pacing the teacher's lounge with military precision. "She's our first Korean exchange student, and the district is watching closely." She adjusted her reading glasses. "This international program could mean significant funding increases for our department." The department heads nodded eagerly. The counselor described the careful course selection designed to challenge advanced students. The vice principal confirmed that Soo-jin's host family had been thoroughly briefed on American academic expectations. The librarian had arranged access to digital resources in multiple languages. "Remember, Mrs." Peterson's voice dropped an octave. "Soo-jin's academic performance reflects directly on our school's international reputation. One academic failure could jeopardize future exchange opportunities." The English department chair raised her hand tentatively. "Margaret, what if there are communication issues? Should we arrange for translation services?" Mrs. Peterson waved dismissively. "The exchange program coordinators assured me that all students pass English proficiency tests before placement. Besides, we have real-time translation apps on all classroom tablets." She tapped her smartphone. "Latest AI technology, practically seamless." As the meeting dispersed, Mrs. Peterson stopped the guidance counselor. "Janet, make sure the struggling students don't slow down our AP curriculum. I want Soo-jin integrated seamlessly." Janet nodded. "Of course. The students know maintaining our academic standards is priority one." Outside the meeting room, Westfield transformed into its daily choreographed chaos. Fresh motivational posters appeared in every hallway. Teachers rehearsed their most engaging lesson plans. Security discreetly reviewed emergency protocols. The school wasn't just an educational institution today. It was a stage, and every faculty member was an actor in an elaborately planned performance designed to showcase American educational excellence. At the center of it all stood Mrs. Peterson, adjusting everything from the classroom temperature to the precise arrangement of desks. Her 15-year tenure as AP literature teacher had been built on academic rigor and college preparation success. The Soo-jin placement wasn't just about cultural exchange. It was about proving that Westfield could compete on an international level. Mrs. Peterson checked her watch. 1 hour until first period. She straightened a slightly askew college banner and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Everything was perfect. Everything was under control. In the school library's quiet corner, Emma Chen methodically reviewed her AP literature homework, her movements efficient and practiced. At 17, she'd been part of Westfield's academic landscape for 4 years, invisible yet ever-present. She carefully highlighted passages from Hamlet, her annotations precise and thoughtful. From her backpack, she retrieved a worn Korean English dictionary, its pages marked with sticky notes and careful translations. Her fingers briefly touched a folder hidden beneath her textbooks. Inside were certificates from Saturday Korean school, letter grades from advanced language courses, and acceptance letters to summer programs in Seoul that she'd never been able to afford. The evidence of abilities no one at Westfield knew existed. The school's PA system crackled to life. All students, please welcome our international exchange student during first period classes. Let's show her true Westfield hospitality. Emma understood the announcement perfectly in English, but her mind automatically processed how it would sound to someone still adjusting to American academic English: confusing, overwhelming, isolating. As she packed her materials, Emma's reflection appeared in the library window. Thick glasses that she'd worn since childhood. Clothes chosen for invisibility rather than style, posture that suggested someone more comfortable with books than people. 4 years at Westfield had taught her the survival value of blending into the background. She'd learned early that standing out academically made you a target for both jealousy and unrealistic expectations. Better to maintain solid B+ averages and avoid attention. Her real intellectual pursuits, Korean literature, international relations, cultural linguistics, remained private passions pursued in solitude. At Korean Saturday school, she was confident, articulate, even considered a leader among her peers. At Westfield, she was simply Emma Chen, quiet, unremarkable, easily overlooked. The contrast between these two versions of herself had become so natural she barely noticed the daily transformation anymore. As Emma headed toward first period, she passed clusters of students excitedly discussing the new exchange student, their anticipation mixed with typical teenage curiosity about the exotic other joining their insular world. None of them considered that genuine cultural exchange might require effort, empathy, or actual communication beyond friendly smiles and exaggerated gestures. Emma checked her schedule. AP Literature, first period, Mrs. Peterson. She'd heard Mrs. Peterson was demanding but fair, expecting excellence from all students regardless of background. As she approached room 234, Emma wondered how Mrs. Peterson would navigate the complexities of international education. She hoped, without much optimism, that it would go smoothly. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the main office escort led Kim Soo-jin through Westfield's crowded hallways. Despite being 17, she moved with the careful dignity of someone representing more than herself. Her navy blazer was perfectly pressed, her smile practiced but genuine. Behind her followed a rolling suitcase containing everything she'd need for academic success: carefully translated textbooks, multiple dictionaries, and a tablet loaded with translation software. Students stopped to stare as she passed. Some whispered excitedly. Others pulled out phones to capture the moment. For most of them, Soo-jin represented their first real encounter with someone from another culture. The attention felt overwhelming, but she maintained her composure. This opportunity had cost her family enormous sacrifices, and she wouldn't waste it. "Welcome to Westfield High School, Soo-jin," the assistant principal said slowly and loudly, as if volume could bridge language barriers. "We are very happy you are here." Soo-jin nodded politely, understanding the sentiment, if not every word. Her English was functional for basic communication, but nowhere near adequate for advanced literature courses. The exchange program had promised additional language support that seemed increasingly theoretical as she faced the reality of American academic expectations. As they approached Mrs. Peterson's classroom, Soo-jin felt her stomach tighten with familiar anxiety. Korean educational culture emphasized academic excellence above all else, but it also provided structured support systems. Here she was navigating alone, carrying the weight of cultural representation along with her personal academic goals. The assistant principal knocked on the classroom door. "Mrs. Peterson, I'd like to introduce Kim Soo-jin, our exchange student from Seoul." Mrs. Peterson opened the door with a welcoming smile that seemed both genuine and slightly strained. "Wonderful. Please come in, Soo-jin. We're honored to have you join our AP Literature class." The classroom fell silent as 30 pairs of American teenage eyes focused on the newcomer. Soo-jin bowed politely, a Korean gesture that felt natural to her but appeared formal and foreign to her classmates. Several students exchanged glances, their expressions mixing curiosity with the unconscious othering that occurs when different cultural norms collide. "Please take any available seat," Mrs. Peterson gestured toward the classroom. Soo-jin chose a desk in the back corner, hoping to observe and adjust before drawing more attention to herself. She carefully arranged her materials, tablet, dictionaries, notebook, and pens with the precision that Korean academic culture demanded. As Mrs. Peterson began the day's lesson on Shakespearean sonnets, Soo-jin's tablet glowed with translation software. But the complexity of literary analysis, the rapid pace of class discussion, and the cultural references embedded in both Shakespeare's work and American teenage conversation created layers of confusion that no app could navigate. Throughout the room, other students took notes, asked questions, and participated in discussions with the casual confidence of native speakers in familiar academic territory. Soo-jin understood perhaps 30% of the content and less of the social dynamics that informed classroom interaction. In the middle of the classroom, Emma Chen sat quietly, her own notebook filled with careful annotations. She observed Soo-jin's struggle with growing concern, recognizing the specific type of academic isolation that occurs when language barriers meet high-stakes educational expectations. Every mistranslation, every confused expression, every moment of social disconnection was painfully familiar from her own early experiences navigating between cultures. As the class period progressed, the gap between Soo-jin's academic preparation and her ability to demonstrate that knowledge in English became increasingly apparent. Mrs. Peterson's well-intentioned but ultimately ineffective attempts to include her highlighted rather than solved the fundamental communication challenge. Emma watched this unfold with a mixture of empathy and internal conflict. She possessed exactly the skills needed to bridge this gap, but revealing them would shatter the carefully constructed invisibility that had protected her throughout high school. The choice between self-preservation and helping another student navigate the same cultural isolation she remembered so clearly weighed heavily in the growing tension of the classroom. 1 hour into the semester's most challenging day, the real test was just beginning. Mrs. Peterson cleared her throat and addressed the class with forced enthusiasm. "Today we're analyzing Shakespeare's Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" This sonnet exemplifies the Elizabethan approach to idealized love through natural metaphor. She turned toward Soo-jin with an encouraging smile. "Soo-jin, would you like to read the first quatrain aloud?" The request, intended as inclusive participation, landed like a spotlight on unprepared performance. Soo-jin looked down at her tablet, where the translation software had rendered Shakespeare's elegant verse into mechanical approximations that captured neither meaning nor beauty. "Shall I compare you, summer day?" she read hesitantly, her pronunciation careful but heavily accented. A few students shifted uncomfortably. Others tried to hide smiles. Mrs. Peterson maintained her professional demeanor while internally calculating how this was derailing her lesson plan. "Very good. Now, can you explain what Shakespeare means by more temperate in this context?" Sujin stared at her tablet as the translation app processed the question. After a long pause, she offered tentatively, "More weather good?" The awkwardness rippled through the classroom. Mrs. Peterson's smile became strained as she realized her carefully planned Socratic dialogue was collapsing into basic vocabulary lessons. From her corner seat, Emma Chen winced at each mistranslation. She understood that Sujin was highly intelligent. Her Korean was sophisticated, her analytical thinking clear when expressed in her native language. But academic English, especially literary analysis, required cultural knowledge and linguistic nuance that couldn't be learned from translation apps. "Perhaps," Mrs. Peterson said, speaking more slowly, "we should focus on the sonnet's basic structure instead." She turned to write on the whiteboard, her movements sharp with frustration. As she faced away from the class, several students exchanged eye rolls and whispered comments. "This is painful to watch," muttered Jake Henderson, the class clown. "How's she supposed to handle AP literature if she can't understand basic English?" "Maybe she should be in ESL classes instead," suggested Madison Torres, her voice loud enough to carry. The comment wasn't meant to be cruel, but its impact on Sujin was immediate. Her face flushed red as she understood enough to recognize dismissal. Mrs. Peterson spun around, her expression stern. "That's enough commentary. We're all here to learn, and part of learning is supporting each other." But the damage was done. The classroom atmosphere had shifted from awkward inclusion to uncomfortable othering. Sujin opened her notebook and began writing rapidly in Korean characters, her way of processing stress and maintaining dignity. To her classmates, the foreign script looked mysterious and further emphasized her separation from their academic community. What they couldn't see was her fluent analysis of Shakespeare's metaphorical techniques, written in sophisticated Korean that demonstrated exactly the kind of critical thinking Mrs. Peterson was trying to elicit. As the class period continued, Mrs. Peterson attempted various strategies, speaking more slowly, using simpler vocabulary, focusing on basic comprehension rather than analysis. Each accommodation further highlighted Sujin's struggles and diminished the academic rigor that defined AP literature. Other students began checking their phones, their engagement dropping as the lesson devolved into remedial instruction. Emma Chen filled her notebook with careful notes, but her attention was split between Shakespeare's sonnets and Sujin's obvious distress. She found herself mentally translating Mrs. Peterson's questions into Korean, then formulating the sophisticated responses she knew Sujin was capable of giving. The disconnect between Sujin's actual abilities and her ability to demonstrate them in English was both frustrating and heartbreaking to witness. During a brief pause while Mrs. Peterson searched for simpler explanatory materials, Emma heard Sujin whisper something in Korean under her breath. It was a perfectly articulated insight about Shakespeare's use of seasonal imagery as a metaphor for the permanence of art versus the temporality of physical beauty. Exactly the kind of sophisticated analysis that would earn an A+ on any AP literature essay. Emma's hands tightened around her pen. She possessed the exact skills needed to bridge this communication gap, but revealing her Korean fluency would expose the carefully constructed persona she'd maintained throughout high school. Her academic invisibility had been both protection and limitation, allowing her to avoid unwanted attention while preventing her from fully engaging with her education. As Mrs. Peterson struggled to explain metaphorical language through gesture and simplified vocabulary, Emma faced a choice that would define not just this class period, but her entire approach to academic authenticity versus social safety. The bell would ring in 20 minutes. Sujin's first day was becoming a disaster that could set the tone for her entire American academic experience. Emma had the power to change that trajectory, but using it would require abandoning 4 years of careful invisibility. Her decision would affect more than just one class period. It would determine whether she continued hiding her abilities or finally allowed herself to be fully seen. Mrs. Peterson made one final attempt to salvage the lesson. "Let's try a different approach," she announced, pulling up a simplified summary of Sonnet 18 on the classroom projector. "Soo-jin, can you tell us what emotions Shakespeare is expressing about the person he's describing?" Soo-jin looked at the projected text, then at her tablet, then back at Mrs. Peterson with growing desperation. The translation app offered feelings about person description, which captured neither the nuance of the question nor the complexity of Shakespeare's emotional landscape. Sorry. I not understand good," Soo-jin admitted, her voice barely audible. The admission felt like academic failure, cultural inadequacy, and personal defeat all compressed into one devastating moment. The classroom fell into uncomfortable silence. Mrs. Peterson's professional composure finally cracked as she realized this wasn't just a challenging teaching moment. It was a fundamental breakdown of her ability to serve a student who deserved better. Her lesson plan, designed for native English speakers with years of literary preparation, had become an inadvertent showcase of exclusion rather than education. "Perhaps we should," Mrs. Peterson began, but her suggestion was interrupted by a quiet voice from the middle of the classroom. "Excuse me?" Every head turned toward Emma Chen, who had never voluntarily spoken during class discussions. Her voice was soft but clear, cutting through the tension like a lifeline thrown into troubled water. Mrs. Peterson paused mid-sentence. "Yes, Emma?" Emma took a deep breath and looked directly at Soo-jin before speaking in fluid, academically precise Korean. "Shakespeare is comparing his beloved to a summer day, but arguing that the person is more beautiful and more constant than summer, which can be too hot or too windy. He's saying that this poem will preserve the person's beauty forever, even after they grow old and die." The room froze in astonishment. Soo-jin's eyes widened in recognition and relief. Mrs. Peterson stared at Emma as if she'd suddenly materialized from another dimension. The students who had been checking their phones looked up with expressions ranging from confusion to amazement. Emma continued in Korean, speaking directly to Soo-jin. "Mrs. Peterson wants to know what emotions Shakespeare is expressing. You can explain that he's writing about eternal love and the power of art to preserve beauty beyond physical existence." Soo-jin's face transformed as understanding flooded her features. She sat up straighter, her confidence returning as she finally had access to the intellectual content she'd been struggling to reach. In Korean, she responded with a sophisticated analysis that demonstrated her advanced literary thinking. Emma translated for the class. "Soo-jin says that Shakespeare is expressing both love and artistic pride. The love for a specific person, but also confidence in his own poetic ability to create something permanent. She notes that this reflects the Renaissance belief in art's power to confer immortality." Mrs. Peterson's mouth opened slightly as she processed this sudden transformation. The student she'd dismissed as unremarkable was not only bilingual but possessed the exact skills needed to unlock meaningful participation from their exchange student. "Emma," Mrs. Peterson said slowly, "how long have you been fluent in Korean?" "Since childhood," Emma replied simply. "My parents enrolled me in Korean Saturday school when I was 6. I've been studying Korean literature and culture for over 10 years. The revelation rippled through the classroom like a wave. Students who had barely noticed Emma for 4 years suddenly saw her as someone entirely different. Soo-jin looked at her with gratitude and growing excitement as she realized she wasn't as academically isolated as she'd feared. Mrs. Peterson struggled to recalibrate her understanding of both students and the sudden possibilities their collaboration represented. "Why didn't you mention this earlier?" Emma's response was quietly dignified. "No one ever asked." As Emma continued facilitating translation between Soo-jin and the class, the entire dynamic shifted. Soo Jin's insights about Shakespeare's techniques were sophisticated and original. Her analysis of metaphorical structure revealed a deep understanding of literary devices. Her connections between Elizabethan poetry and contemporary Korean verse traditions offered perspectives none of the American students had considered. With Emma's translation bridging the language gap, Soo Jin transformed from struggling outsider to valuable contributor. Her comments sparked discussions about cultural approaches to love poetry, the universality of seasonal metaphors, and the ways different languages handle poetic rhythm and sound. Mrs. Peterson watched in fascination as her classroom evolved from stilted accommodation to genuine intellectual exchange. The lesson she'd planned around basic comprehension became an advanced seminar on cross-cultural literary analysis. "Emma," she said during a brief pause, "your translation skills are remarkable. Have you considered pursuing this academically?" Before Emma could respond, Soo Jin spoke in Korean, her words rapid and excited. Emma smiled, the first genuine smile she'd displayed all semester, before translating. "Soo Jin wants to know if I've read any Korean poetry." She's surprised to meet an American student who understands Han. That's a uniquely Korean emotional concept that appears in much of their literature. "Have you?" Mrs. Peterson asked, genuinely curious. "Yes," Emma said simply. "Korean literature has been my passion for years. I've read extensively in both classical and contemporary works." The admission hung in the air as Mrs. Peterson realized she'd been teaching a student whose expertise in certain areas exceeded her own. Emma Chen, invisible for 4 years, possessed knowledge that could enrich not just this class, but potentially the entire school's international program. As the class period drew to a close, something fundamental had shifted. Soo Jin sat straighter, engaged and intellectually stimulated for the first time since arriving at Westfield. Emma had emerged from invisibility into recognition. Mrs. Peterson faced the realization that her assumptions about student capabilities had been profoundly limited. But the transformation was just beginning. The bell was about to ring, and with it would come questions, attention, and opportunities that none of them had anticipated when the day began. The final minutes of first period brought a whirlwind of activity that would reshape multiple academic futures. As Emma continued translating between Soo Jin and the class, their collaboration revealed the intellectual sophistication both students possessed but had been unable to fully demonstrate. "Soo Jin wants to add something about the sonnet's structure," Emma explained to Mrs. Peterson. "She notices that Shakespeare uses the volta, the turn in line 9, differently than Korean seijo poetry, but both forms use structural shifts to deepen emotional impact." Mrs. Peterson nodded eagerly, finally experiencing the kind of international literary discussion she'd hoped for when Soo Jin was first assigned to her class. That's exactly the kind of comparative analysis we need in AP literature. "Emma, can you ask Soo Jin to elaborate on seijo poetry?" As Emma translated the question, Soo Jin's face lit up with academic excitement. Her response in Korean was animated and detailed, filled with references to classical poets and structural techniques. Emma's translation revealed sophisticated understanding of both Korean and Western poetic traditions. She's explaining that seijo poems also compress complex emotions into brief forms, but they use nature imagery differently, more focused on seasons as reflection of human psychology rather than contrasts to human beauty, Emma explained. She thinks American students might find seijo interesting because it's like Twitter poetry, very short but emotionally powerful. The comparison to Twitter poetry made several students laugh with recognition, and for the first time, Soo Jin smiled at their reaction. She understood enough English to recognize that her academic insights were being received positively rather than dismissed or simplified. Jake Henderson, who had made the dismissive comment earlier, raised his hand tentatively. "Could we actually read some of that Korean poetry? It sounds interesting." Emma looked at Mrs. Peterson, who nodded encouragingly. "I have some translations in my backpack," Emma said quietly. "I could share them if you'd like." "Please do," Mrs. Peterson replied, her enthusiasm genuine for the first time all morning. As Emma retrieved a worn notebook filled with her own translations of classical Korean poetry, the classroom atmosphere continued transforming. Students who had been disengaged were now curious about literary traditions they'd never encountered. Soo-jin was no longer an academic burden, but a resource for exploring new perspectives. The bell rang just as Emma finished reading her translation of a Yoon Seondo Sijo about autumn leaves. The poem's brief but emotionally resonant structure had captured the class's attention in ways that had seemed impossible 30 minutes earlier. "We'll continue this discussion tomorrow," Mrs. Peterson announced as students began packing their materials. "Emma, could you stay for a moment? And Soo-jin, thank you for sharing your insights. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's class." As the room emptied, Mrs. Peterson approached Emma with an expression mixing apology, curiosity, and professional calculation. "Emma, I owe you an apology. I've clearly underestimated your abilities and interests." Emma nodded politely, but remained reserved. 4 years of academic invisibility had taught her to be cautious about sudden attention, even positive recognition. "Your Korean fluency and literary knowledge are remarkable," Mrs. Peterson continued. "Have you considered applying for our school's peer tutoring program? Or perhaps working as a cultural liaison for international students?" Before Emma could respond, Soo-jin approached with her tablet, typing rapidly. She showed the screen to Emma, who smiled at the Korean text before translating. "Soo-jin is asking if I could help her with English academic writing. She says she has many ideas for essays but struggles to express them properly in English." Mrs. Peterson's eyes lit up with possibility. "That could benefit both of you. Emma, you could practice advanced Korean while helping Soo-jin develop her academic English. It's exactly the kind of peer collaboration that makes international programs successful." Emma hesitated, recognizing that accepting would mean abandoning her carefully maintained academic invisibility. But looking at Soo-jin's hopeful expression, she felt the same internal shift that had compelled her to speak up during class. "I'd be willing to try," she said finally. Mrs. Peterson smiled with genuine warmth. "Excellent. I'll speak with the guidance counselor about formalizing this arrangement. Emma, I suspect this partnership could benefit your own academic future as well." As they prepared to leave for second period, Soo-jin spoke to Emma in Korean, her gratitude evident even to non-speakers. Emma's translation revealed the depth of connection that had formed. "She says she felt lost and stupid until I translated. She was considering asking her host family to help her transfer to easier classes. Now she wants to stay and learn." The impact of those words resonated with Mrs. Peterson, who realized how close they'd come to losing a valuable student due to communication barriers that could have been easily addressed with the right resources. "Emma," she said as they reached the classroom door, "I want you to know that what you did today wasn't just translation. You prevented a bright student from being excluded from the education she deserves. That's something to be proud of." As they walked into the crowded hallway, Emma felt the weight of 4 years of invisibility lifting from her shoulders. Students looked at her with new curiosity and respect. Teachers who had never noticed her existence were suddenly aware of her presence. The comfortable anonymity she'd cultivated was gone, replaced by recognition that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Soo-jin walked beside her, no longer isolated but connected to the school's academic community through their partnership. Her confidence was returning as she realized that her intellectual abilities could be demonstrated and appreciated, even across language barriers. But the real transformation was just beginning. Word of Emma's bilingual abilities and the successful collaboration with Soo-jin would spread quickly through Westfield's interconnected academic community. By lunch, both students would face questions, opportunities, and challenges that would reshape their high school experience and potentially their future academic paths. The day that had begun with cultural isolation and academic struggle was evolving into something neither student had anticipated: genuine recognition of their abilities and the possibility of using those abilities to help each other succeed. As they headed to their respective second-period classes, both Emma and Soo-jin carried with them the knowledge that sometimes the most important academic discoveries happen not in textbooks, but in the moment when hidden talents finally find their voice. By third period, news of the morning's dramatic revelation had spread through Westfield's academic network with the speed and embellishment typical of high school gossip. Emma found herself the center of attention for the first time in her educational career, an experience that felt simultaneously validating and overwhelming. In AP History, Mr. Rodriguez approached her before class began. "Emma, I heard about your Korean language skills from Mrs. Peterson. I'm wondering if you might be interested in presenting about the Korean War from a Korean perspective? We could use cultural insights beyond the standard American textbook approach." The request represented exactly the kind of academic opportunity Emma had always dreamed of but never thought to pursue. Her knowledge of Korean history, gained through years of cultural study, could finally serve a pedagogical purpose. "I'd need to research Korean historical perspectives more thoroughly," she replied, her natural caution warring with newfound confidence. "But yes, I think I could contribute something valuable." Meanwhile, Soo-jin was experiencing her own transformation in AP Chemistry. Her previous struggles with English had made it difficult to express her strong scientific knowledge, but today she carried with her the confidence that came from successful academic collaboration. When the teacher assigned lab partners, instead of being relegated to working alone or with reluctant classmates, she found students volunteering to work with her. "I heard you helped analyze poetry in first period," said Marcus Williams, one of the stronger chemistry students. "I bet you've got different approaches to problem solving that could help our lab work." The assumption was correct. Soo-jin's Korean educational background had emphasized mathematical rigor and systematic analysis in ways that complemented American scientific methodology. With Marcus willing to help with English technical vocabulary and Soo-jin contributing advanced analytical skills, their partnership promised to benefit both students. During lunch period, Emma found herself in an unfamiliar position, sitting at a table surrounded by students, eager to engage with her knowledge and perspectives. Maya Patel, the student body president, approached with what was clearly a planned proposition. "Emma, we're organizing International Week next month, and we desperately need someone who can help us move beyond the typical food and fashion superficiality," Maya explained. "Would you consider helping us develop programming that actually explores cultural differences in meaningful ways?" The invitation represented the kind of leadership opportunity Emma had never considered pursuing. Her academic knowledge could serve a broader educational purpose, helping her peers develop the cultural competency that American students increasingly needed in a globalized world. "What kind of programming did you have in mind?" Emma asked, surprised by her own willingness to engage. "Cultural bridge conversations, maybe comparative literature discussions, international student panels where communication actually works," Maya outlined enthusiastically. "We want to move beyond tokenism to genuine cross-cultural learning." As Maya spoke, Soo-jin approached their table, carrying her lunch tray with the careful dignity that had characterized her morning transformation. Emma gestured for her to join them, and Maya immediately switched to welcoming mode. "Soo-jin, perfect timing. We were just discussing International Week programming. Emma thinks you might be interested in participating?" Emma translated the invitation, and Soo-jin's response revealed both enthusiasm and thoughtful consideration of what meaningful cultural exchange might require. Her suggestions, filtered through Emma's translation, impressed Maya with their sophistication and practical insight. "She says that most cultural exchange programs focus on surface differences: food, clothing, holidays. but miss deeper things like educational philosophy, family structures, or approaches to social problems, Emma translated. She thinks American students might be interested in Korean perspectives on academic competition, technology integration, or environmental policy. Maya took notes rapidly. This is exactly what we need. Would you both be willing to co-present some sessions? The collaboration that had begun with academic necessity was expanding into broader educational leadership. Emma and Soo-jin exchanged glances that communicated mutual commitment to using their partnership for purposes larger than individual academic success. As lunch period progressed, other students approached with questions, requests for help, and expressions of curiosity about Emma's background that she'd never expected to receive. The invisibility that had defined her high school experience was dissolving, replaced by recognition that felt both empowering and somewhat overwhelming. Sarah Kim, a junior who had struggled in her own Korean language classes, asked tentatively, "Emma, I heard you're really fluent in Korean. My parents want me to maintain cultural connections, but I'm not doing well in Saturday school. Do you think you could tutor me?" The request struck Emma as deeply meaningful. She could help another Korean-American student navigate the same cultural bridge building that had shaped her own educational journey. "I'd be happy to help," she replied, recognizing that her skills could serve her immediate community as well as international exchange students. By the time the lunch bell rang, Emma had committed to 3 different academic partnerships, 2 presentation opportunities, and a tutoring relationship. The sudden visibility felt like stepping into sunlight after years in shadows, overwhelming but ultimately nourishing. As she walked toward 4th period, Emma reflected on the morning's transformation. Her decision to speak up during Mrs. Peterson's class had created ripple effects she never could have anticipated. Soo-jin was no longer academically isolated, she was no longer invisible, and their collaboration was opening doors for both students that had previously seemed impossible to reach. But with recognition came responsibility. Other students and teachers were looking to her for cultural expertise, language skills, and cross-cultural bridge building that would require her to continue growing beyond her comfort zone. The shy, invisible student who had entered 1st period that morning was being replaced by someone who possessed valuable skills and the opportunity to use them meaningfully. The transformation was both thrilling and challenging, requiring Emma to redefine her relationship with academic visibility and community engagement. As she settled into 4th period English composition, Emma realized that her high school experience was fundamentally changing. The question now was whether she could rise to meet the opportunities that recognition was creating, while helping Soo-jin navigate her own academic journey with confidence and success. The afternoon would bring new challenges and possibilities that neither student had anticipated when the day began with a simple translation problem that had evolved into something much more significant. 4th period brought Emma face-to-face with Mrs. Williams, the English department head who had been observing from the hallway during the morning's dramatic translation session. As students settled into English composition, Mrs. Williams approached Emma's desk with undisguised curiosity. "Miss Chen, I understand you've been hiding some remarkable language abilities from us," she began, her tone mixing professional interest with gentle reproach. "Mrs. Peterson filled me in on this morning's events. I'm wondering why a student with your evident capabilities has been content to maintain B+ averages when you clearly possess skills for much higher achievement." The question cut to the heart of Emma's 4-year academic strategy. She looked around the classroom, aware that other students were listening to this uncomfortably public conversation about her previously private abilities. "I've always focused on consistent performance rather than standing out," Emma replied carefully, recognizing that her old justifications sounded increasingly inadequate in light of the morning's revelations. Mrs. Williams nodded thoughtfully. "Consistent performance has its value, but underutilizing exceptional abilities serves neither you nor your potential. I'm particularly interested in your translation work this morning. Have you considered that your bilingual skills could open doors to advanced academic opportunities? Emma shifted uncomfortably as more students tuned into the conversation. I hadn't really thought about it as an academic asset, she admitted. Well, you should start, Mrs. Williams said firmly. Westfield has partnerships with several universities that specifically value bilingual students for international programs. Your combination of language skills and literary knowledge could qualify you for scholarships and study abroad opportunities you may not have considered. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Soo Jin, who had been reassigned to this English composition section after the morning's revelations. Mrs. Williams smiled warmly as she entered. Perfect timing, Soo Jin. I was just discussing academic opportunities with Emma. I believe you two have already begun collaborating? Emma quickly translated the question, and Soo Jin's response revealed both gratitude and growing confidence in her American academic experience. She says that working with me this morning helped her understand that she doesn't have to choose between Korean intellectual approaches and American academic expectations, Emma translated. She can use both, Mrs. Williams looked intrigued. That's a sophisticated understanding of bicultural education. Emma, I want you both to know that the administration has been discussing creating a formal peer tutoring program for international students. Would you be interested in being our pilot participants? The offer represented institutional recognition of what had begun as an emergency translation session. Emma felt the weight of opportunity and responsibility settling on her shoulders. What would that involve? She asked. Structured mentoring sessions, academic credit, potential recommendation letters for college applications, and compensation for your tutoring services, Mrs. Williams explained. But more importantly, you'd be helping develop a program that could assist future international students. As Mrs. Williams outlined the opportunity, Emma realized that her morning decision to speak up had created cascading consequences far beyond helping one student with one Shakespeare sonnet. She was being offered the chance to transform her educational experience and potentially influence Westfield's approach to international student support. Soo Jin listened intently as Emma translated, her expression growing more animated as she understood the scope of what was being proposed. Her response, when it came, reflected both personal investment and broader cultural awareness. She wants to know if the program would work both ways, Emma translated. Could she help American students understand Korean educational approaches while improving her English? Mrs. Williams smiled approvingly. That's exactly the kind of reciprocal learning we hope to achieve. Cultural exchange should benefit everyone involved. As the formal class period began, Emma found herself in the unprecedented position of being recognized as an academic resource by faculty and sought out by peers for her expertise. The comfortable invisibility that had defined her high school experience was dissolving into something more complex and demanding. During the writing exercise that followed, Emma partnered with Soo Jin to work on a comparative essay about cultural approaches to education. Watching Soo Jin express sophisticated ideas through their collaborative translation process, Emma began to understand the true value of the skills she'd been hiding. Your Korean is better than my Korean teachers, whispered David Park, a Korean-American student who had been struggling to maintain cultural connections while fitting into American social expectations. Could you help me with my Saturday school homework sometime? The request represented another layer of recognition and responsibility. Emma wasn't just helping international students. She could serve as a bridge for Korean-American students navigating similar cultural challenges. As fourth period concluded, Mrs. Williams approached their collaborative workspace. Emma, I'd like you to consider applying for our Advanced Independent Study program next semester. You could design a project combining your language skills with literary analysis, perhaps comparing Korean and Western poetic traditions. The suggestion opened academic possibilities Emma had never imagined pursuing. Independent study programs were typically reserved for students with exceptional demonstrated abilities and clear academic focus. Being invited to apply represented a fundamental shift in how faculty perceived her capabilities. "I'll need to think about it," Emma replied, overwhelmed by the sudden expansion of her academic horizons. "Of course," Mrs. Williams said, "but don't think too long. Students with your abilities should be challenging themselves at the highest possible levels." As they prepared to leave for fifth period, Soo-jin spoke to Emma in Korean, her voice carrying new confidence and enthusiasm. "She says she feels like she's finally found her academic voice in America," Emma translated to Mrs. Williams. "And she wants to help other international students find theirs too." Mrs. Williams nodded with satisfaction. "That's exactly what successful cultural exchange looks like. You've both discovered that your differences are strengths, not obstacles." Walking toward their respective fifth period classes, Emma reflected on how completely her academic life had transformed in less than a day. The shy, invisible student who had started the morning afraid of drawing attention was being encouraged by faculty to pursue advanced opportunities and leadership roles. But the transformation wasn't just about personal recognition. Through helping Soo-jin, Emma had discovered the satisfaction of using her skills to make a meaningful difference in another student's educational experience. The abilities she'd hidden for 4 years weren't just academic assets. They were tools for building bridges between cultures and helping other students succeed. As she entered fifth period government class, Emma carried with her a new understanding of her own potential and responsibility. The question was no longer whether she could handle increased visibility and academic challenge, but whether she was ready to embrace the leadership role that her newfound recognition was creating. Fifth period government class brought yet another transformation as Mr. Thompson, who had heard about the morning's events from the interconnected faculty network, approached Emma before class began. "Miss Chen, I understand you have insights into Korean political and educational systems," he said, pulling up a chair beside her desk. "We're studying comparative government systems next week, and I'm wondering if you could provide perspectives on how Korean democracy developed differently from American democracy." The request represented another opportunity to share knowledge she'd gained through years of cultural study but had never been asked to apply academically. "I'd need to prepare thoroughly," Emma replied, her natural caution still competing with growing confidence. Korean political development involves complex historical factors that require careful explanation. "I have complete confidence in your ability to handle complexity," Mr. Thompson assured her. "Your bilingual background suggests you understand nuanced cultural differences in ways most students don't." As other students entered the classroom, several approached Emma with questions and comments that indicated her morning transformation had become school-wide knowledge. "Is it true you speak perfect Korean?" asked Ashley Martinez, the class vice president. "My family is hosting an exchange student from Seoul next semester, and I'm worried about communication issues." "Could you help our Model UN team understand Korean positions on international issues?" added James Wilson, the debate team captain. "We always struggle with accurate cultural perspectives." Each request represented recognition of Emma's expertise and opportunities to contribute meaningfully to her school community. But they also highlighted the responsibility that came with visibility and the expectations that others were developing about her capabilities. Meanwhile, in her AP biology class, Soo-jin was experiencing continued academic success as her confidence grew throughout the day. Her lab partner, Maria Santos, had discovered that Soo-jin's systematic approach to experimental design, rooted in Korean educational methodology, produced exceptionally detailed and accurate results. "Your data organization is incredible," Maria told her during their genetics lab. "Could you show me that systematic approach you use for complex problems?" The request reflected growing recognition that Soo-jin's different educational background was an asset rather than a barrier to collaborative success. When the final bell rang, Emma found herself surrounded by students and faculty with questions, requests, and opportunities that would have been unimaginable that morning. The transformation from invisible to indispensable had occurred with breathtaking speed. Mrs. Peterson appeared as the crowd around Emma began to disperse. "Emma, I wanted to let you know that I've spoken with the guidance counselor about your academic trajectory. Given your demonstrated abilities, we think you should consider adjusting your course selection for next semester." "What kind of adjustments?" Emma asked. "Honors Korean literature through our distance learning program, advanced international relations, possibly college-level linguistics courses through our dual enrollment program," Mrs. Peterson outlined. "Your morning performance suggests you're ready for much greater academic challenges." The suggestions represented a complete restructuring of Emma's educational path, moving from safe invisibility to accelerated advancement that would position her for competitive college admissions and scholarship opportunities. "I appreciate the recognition," Emma said carefully, "but I want to make sure I can handle increased expectations." Mrs. Peterson smiled warmly. "Emma, you've been handling increased expectations all day. The question isn't whether you can succeed at higher levels, it's whether you're ready to stop hiding your capabilities." As the conversation concluded, Soo-jin approached with her backpack and a shy but grateful smile. "Ready to walk home?" Emma asked in Korean. "More ready than I've been since arriving in America," Soo-jin replied, her response carrying newfound confidence and optimism. As they left Westfield High School together, both students carried with them the knowledge that their academic futures had been fundamentally altered by the morning's events. Emma's emergence from invisibility had created opportunities for advanced study, leadership roles, and recognition she had never pursued. Soo-jin's successful integration into academic discussions had proven that her intellectual abilities could thrive in an American educational environment with appropriate support. But beyond individual transformation, their collaboration had demonstrated the potential for meaningful cross-cultural exchange that benefited entire educational communities. Their partnership had shown faculty and students alike that diversity of perspective and approach could enhance rather than complicate academic achievement. Walking through the autumn afternoon, Emma and Soo-jin discussed their plans for the peer tutoring program, International Week presentations, and the various academic opportunities that had emerged from a single morning's crisis. "Do you think we change things permanently?" Soo-jin asked in Korean as they reached the corner where their paths would diverge. Emma considered the question carefully. "I think we discovered that things were always ready to change. We just needed the courage to let them." As they separated toward their respective homes, both students carried with them the transformative understanding that hidden talents, once revealed, create ripple effects that extend far beyond personal recognition. Their collaboration had not only changed their individual academic trajectories, but had also begun reshaping Westfield's approach to international education and student development. The shy girl who had translated fluently that morning had become a bridge between cultures, a mentor for struggling students, and a model for how academic courage could create opportunities for everyone involved. Her transformation from invisible to invaluable had required only the willingness to use her voice when it mattered most. 1 week later, Emma Chen stood before the Westfield High School faculty meeting, no longer the invisible student who had hidden in classroom corners. Her navy blazer was crisp, her presentation materials organized, and her confidence genuine as she prepared to outline the peer tutoring program that had grown from a single morning's translation crisis. "The International Student Mentorship Program has exceeded all initial expectations," she began, addressing the assembled teachers with the poise of someone who had discovered her authentic academic voice. "In 1 week, we've facilitated successful academic integration for 3 international students, improved cultural competency among American students, and created collaborative learning opportunities that benefit everyone involved." Principal Rodriguez nodded approvingly from the front row. The program Emma was describing had become a model for other schools in the district, attracting attention from education officials and international exchange organizations. Emma clicked to her first slide, displaying statistics that demonstrated the program's early success. Sujin's AP Literature scores have improved by 2 letter grades since receiving translation support. Her essay on comparative poetry techniques earned an A+ and will be submitted to the state literary magazine. She paused to let the academic achievement sink in before continuing. But the benefits extend beyond individual students. American participants report increased cultural awareness, improved collaborative skills, and greater appreciation for diverse perspectives in academic discussions. Mrs. Peterson smiled with unconcealed pride at her former invisible student's transformation into an educational leader. The shy girl who had hesitated to speak in class was now presenting innovative programming to experienced educators. The peer tutoring model works because it recognizes that every student brings valuable knowledge to academic collaboration, Emma explained. International students contribute different analytical approaches, cultural perspectives, and intellectual frameworks that enhance rather than disrupt classroom learning. She advanced to testimonials from participating students, each reflecting the mutual benefit that effective cultural exchange could create. David Park, a Korean-American student, reports that working with our program helped him reconnect with cultural knowledge he'd been losing. Maria Santos improved her systematic thinking through collaboration with Sujin's experimental methodology. Jake Henderson developed empathy and communication skills that have improved all his group work. The presentation concluded with Emma's proposal for program expansion, including training modules for faculty, structured mentorship protocols, and integration with existing academic support services. We recommend implementing this model district-wide, she concluded, because the challenges international students face aren't unique to Westfield, and the benefits of meaningful cultural exchange should be available to all students. As the faculty meeting concluded, teachers approached Emma with questions about implementation, requests for training, and expressions of amazement at her professional presentation skills. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed that Emma Chen could deliver a presentation like that, whispered Mr. Thompson to Mrs. Williams. She's completely transformed. I don't think she's transformed, Mrs. Williams replied thoughtfully. I think she's finally allowing us to see who she always was. Meanwhile, in the hallway outside, Sujin waited with her own materials for the student presentation that would follow the faculty meeting. Her confidence had grown steadily throughout the week as she discovered that American academic environments could appreciate and utilize her intellectual strengths. When Emma emerged from the faculty meeting, Sujin greeted her with excited Korean that Emma translated for nearby teachers. She says the peer tutoring program has helped her understand that she doesn't have to choose between Korean and American educational approaches. She can use both to contribute something unique. Their presentation to the student body that afternoon drew an audience that filled the auditorium. Word of the program's success had spread through Westfield's social networks, creating genuine curiosity about international perspectives and cross-cultural collaboration. 3 weeks ago, I was the invisible girl sitting quietly in the back of classrooms, Emma told the assembled students. Today I'm here because I learned that hiding our abilities doesn't protect us from challenges, it prevents us from contributing to solutions. She gestured toward Sujin, who had prepared her own remarks in carefully practiced English. Sujin will tell you about her experience, but I want you to understand that her success isn't just about language learning, it's about recognizing that different doesn't mean deficient. Sujin's presentation, delivered with growing confidence and occasional assistance from Emma, impressed the audience with its sophisticated analysis of cultural differences in educational methodology and its practical suggestions for improving international student integration. American students think very quickly and speak ideas immediately, Sujin explained, her English clear despite her accent. Korean students think very carefully before speaking. Both ways have advantages. When we work together, we make better thinking and better speaking. The presentation concluded with an open forum where students could ask questions about cultural differences, language learning, and academic collaboration. The discussion that followed revealed genuine curiosity about international perspectives and willingness to engage with cross-cultural learning opportunities. As the assembly ended, students approached both Emma and Soo-jin with requests to join the mentorship program, questions about cultural exchange, and expressions of support for expanding international student services. "I want to be a mentor for the next exchange student," announced Ashley Martinez. "I realized I don't know anything about other educational systems, and I want to learn." "Could we start a comparative government club?" asked James Wilson. "I think American students need to understand how other countries approach civic education." Each request reflected the broader impact that Emma and Soo-jin's collaboration had created, extending beyond individual academic success to influence school-wide attitudes toward cultural diversity and international engagement. That evening, Emma received a phone call from Dr. Sarah Kim, the Director of Korean Studies at the State University. Word of the peer tutoring program had reached academic circles interested in bilingual education and cross-cultural pedagogy. "Emma, I understand you've developed innovative approaches to international student mentorship," Dr. Kim began. "I'd like to invite you to present your model at our conference on bilingual education next month. We're particularly interested in peer-to-peer cultural exchange programs." The invitation represented recognition at the university level and potential opportunities for advanced study that Emma had never imagined pursuing. "I'm honored by the invitation," Emma replied, "but I should mention that this program is a collaboration with Soo-jin. She's contributed equally to its development and success." "Even better," Dr. Kim responded. "Joint presentations from students representing both sides of cultural exchange are exactly what our conference needs." As Emma shared the news with Soo-jin the next day, both students reflected on how completely their academic trajectories had changed since that first translation crisis in Mrs. Peterson's AP Literature class. "Do you ever regret speaking up that day?" Soo-jin asked in Korean as they worked together in the library, preparing materials for their next mentorship session. Emma considered the question while organizing Korean poetry translations that had become part of Westfield's international literature curriculum. "I regret waiting 4 years to find my voice," she replied finally, "but I'm grateful that when the moment came, I was brave enough to use it." Their conversation was interrupted by 3 underclassmen who had been assigned to their mentorship program: a shy freshman from Vietnam, a confident sophomore from Mexico, and an enthusiastic junior from Nigeria. Each brought different challenges and strengths to the collaborative learning environment Emma and Soo-jin had created. "Ready to help some new students find their voices?" Emma asked Soo-jin as their mentees approached with homework questions and cultural concerns. "Ready," Soo-jin replied in English, her confidence evident in both languages. As the mentorship session began, Emma reflected on the journey from invisible to indispensable that had defined her senior year transformation. The shy girl who had hidden her abilities for 4 years had become a bridge between cultures, a mentor for struggling students, and a model for how academic courage could create opportunities that benefited entire educational communities. Her story had become proof that the most valuable talents are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment when courage overcomes caution and authentic voices finally find the strength to speak. In classrooms around the world, there are students whose abilities remain invisible, whose potential waits for recognition, whose contributions could transform educational communities if given the chance to shine. The question isn't whether these hidden talents exist. It's whether we have the courage to look beyond surface appearances, to listen for voices that speak quietly but carry profound wisdom, and to create environments where every student's authentic abilities can flourish. Emma Chen's transformation from invisible to invaluable had required only the willingness to translate when translation was needed most. Sometimes, the most important academic discoveries happen not in textbooks, but in the moment when hidden talents finally find their voice and use it to help others discover theirs. Epilogue. 6 months later. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Westfield High School's newly established International Student Resource Center as Emma Chen, now officially titled Student Cultural Liaison, prepared materials for the day's orientation session. Her gray cardigan had been replaced by professional attire that reflected her role as both student leader and institutional representative. On her desk sat several framed items that told the story of her transformation. A letter of commendation from the school district, an acceptance letter to the university's prestigious International Studies program with a full scholarship, and a photo from the State Bilingual Education Conference where she and Soo-jin had presented their peer mentorship model to hundreds of educators. "Good morning, Emma," called Soo-jin as she entered the center, carrying materials for her own role as International Student Ambassador. Her English had become fluent and confident, though she still collaborated with Emma on complex academic translations for newer exchange students. "Ready for our new arrivals?" Emma asked, gesturing toward the schedule that showed 5 international students beginning their Westfield experience that day. "More than ready," Soo-jin replied, her smile reflecting the confidence that had grown from successful academic integration to educational leadership. "I remember how lost I felt 6 months ago. Today, we make sure no student experiences that isolation." Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Peterson, who had become the faculty sponsor for the International Student Resource Center and a strong advocate for cross-cultural academic programming. "Emma, Soo-jin, the new students are gathering in the main conference room," she announced. "Are you prepared for orientation?" The orientation that followed demonstrated how completely the school's approach to international education had evolved. Instead of attempting to force international students into existing American academic molds, Westfield now recognized and utilized the diverse perspectives and methodologies that exchange students brought to their educational community. "Welcome to Westfield High School," Emma began, addressing the new international students in English before switching to Korean for the Seoul exchange student, Spanish for the Mexican participant, and Mandarin for the Beijing representative. "You're not here to become American students. You're here to contribute your unique perspectives while developing new skills and knowledge." The orientation covered practical matters, course selection, cultural expectations, academic support services, but also emphasized the value that international students brought to classroom discussions, collaborative projects, and cross-cultural understanding. "6 months ago, I felt invisible in American classrooms," Soo-jin shared during her portion of the presentation. "Today, I'm helping other students find their voices because I learned that being different is not a deficit, it's a strength." As the morning session concluded, Emma reflected on how completely her high school experience had been transformed by a single moment of academic courage. The shy, invisible student who had hidden her abilities for 4 years had become a recognized leader whose bilingual skills and cultural knowledge served not just international students, but the entire Westfield community. Her transformation had created ripple effects that extended far beyond personal recognition. The peer mentorship program had become a model for other schools. Faculty had received training in cross-cultural education. American students had developed greater cultural competency and appreciation for diverse perspectives. But perhaps most importantly, Emma had learned that authentic academic success came not from hiding abilities to avoid attention, but from using those abilities to help others succeed and to contribute meaningfully to educational communities. As she prepared for her afternoon advanced independent study session, a project comparing Korean and Western approaches to literature that would form the basis of her university honors thesis, Emma carried with her the knowledge that the most valuable education happens when students find the courage to be fully themselves and to use their authentic abilities in service of larger purposes. The invisible girl who had translated fluently that first morning had discovered that visibility, while challenging, created opportunities to build bridges, mentor struggling students, and contribute to meaningful educational change. Her story had become proof that in classrooms everywhere, extraordinary abilities wait quietly for the moment when courage overcomes caution and authentic voices finally find the strength to speak. The most important academic discoveries often happen not in textbooks, but in the moment when hidden talents are finally revealed and used to help others discover their own potential. Sometimes all it takes is one student brave enough to translate when translation is needed most. Sometimes that single act of courage changes not just one classroom, but an entire educational community's understanding of what success looks like when diversity becomes a strength and differences become bridges rather than barriers. Emma Chen's transformation from invisible to invaluable had required only the willingness to use her voice when it mattered most. Her legacy would be measured not just in personal academic achievement, but in the countless other students who would find their own voices because she had shown them that hidden talents, once revealed, create possibilities that benefit everyone involved. The shy girl had become a bridge builder, and in doing so, had discovered that the most meaningful academic success comes from helping others find their way across the same bridges she had learned to build.